Hi there, I'm Matthew Sheffield. Thanks for being here with me for another episode of Theory of Change. It's great to have you here. Got another great program for you today and a great discussion. But before we get into that, I did want to just go through a little bit of housekeeping. This show is part of the Flux Media Network, so go to flux.community and you can get all kinds of great podcasts and articles about politics, religion, media, and technology, and how they all interrelate with each other. And if you want to go to the archives of Theory of Change, just go to theoryofchange.show, and you can go directly to the archives there, and we've got transcripts and video and audio of all the episodes. But the full transcripts are only available to Patreon subscribers, which of course takes me to the next part, which is we need your help to keep videos like these going and podcasts like these going. So please go to patreon.com/discoverflux. It is imperative that we support independent media in this country. We're seeing such a conglomerate takeover of everything in media, and it's really harming things because it's kind of dumbing things down to a bad level and not looking at the larger trends of how we're doing in this country and elsewhere. So please do support us at patreon.com/discoverflux. All right, well, so with that out of the way, I will introduce today's show and today's guest. We've talked a lot on this program about the growing threat of political extremism and how far-right activists are leveraging religion and business connections to build power over the minds of millions of Americans. And yet, despite all of that, it's also the case that people can change. No matter how strong they hold their viewpoints today, no one was born with their opinions. And having been born and raised in fundamentalist Mormonism and then left it, I can personally attest to the fact that people can change their opinions when exposed to the facts. The process is usually a gradual one, but it is real for many of us. The results of the 2022 elections in the United States are also proof of this as well, on a much bigger scale. Almost everywhere, Republicans who actively put forward Donald Trump's election lies lost their races. And interestingly enough, many of those losses seem to have been caused. Hold on. The results of the 2022 elections in the United States are also proof of this as well, on a much bigger scale. Almost everywhere, Republicans who actively put forward Donald Trump's election lies lost their races. And interestingly enough, many of those losses seem to have come at the hands of people who supported Republicans who didn't promote Trump's election lies. In Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and lots of places in between, millions of Republican-leaning voters couldn't bring themselves to support Donald Trump's dangerous sore loser campaign. Joining me to discuss what's going on here is Melissa Peltier. She is the director and writer of a documentary called The Game Is Up: Disillusioned Trump Voters Tell Their Stories. And it's a film that closely profiles several people who supported Donald Trump in 2016 and then decided to change their minds. And it asks also why they did so as well. So thanks for being here, Melissa.
You're very welcome. I'm really happy to be here.
All right. Well,
yeah.
So tell us. We're going to play the trailer in a little bit here, but just give us a little quick overview of the film and what you were trying to do with it.
Well, I was inspired in 2017 to the middle of 2018 by watching a former Republican Tea Party congressman and former, well, at the time he was current, very right-wing shock jock radio guy with a very successful show, Joe Walsh. I didn't have the highest opinion of him before this. And I started watching him, and I remember reading something about woke Joe Walsh. And so I started following him, and all he was really doing was just asking questions about Trump. He was trying to support him, but he was asking questions. And as time went on, his questions got more and more pointed and more and more critical of Trump, until finally, after Helsinki in July 2018, he just said, I can't do this anymore. I cannot do this. And that was great to watch in real time, because to me, all the things he was pointing out were absolutely factual and logical. And I thought naively that the whole Republican Congress would follow suit, and they didn't at all. So that inspired me to look for more people like Joe. And I was just always curious about what was it that changed your mind? Why did you vote for Trump? And we definitely found that not everybody was a crazy racist or a crazy white supremacist or whatever. Everybody had their own reasons in 2016. They had personal reasons. And generally when they changed, it was because of something that touched them personally. And so I just wanted to give people permission to change their minds about Trump by seeing others who had done so.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to roll the trailer here, and then we'll get into talking about some of the other people as well that you show in the trailer.
When you're in the conservative media world like I was in, you are told to say every day that Donald Trump walks on water. I was told by my bosses to only say good things about Donald Trump. I told them to go.
Most of our opinions about Donald Trump do not come from CNN or from MSNBC or from Fox. Most of our opinions about Donald Trump come from Donald Trump himself.
People say, oh, I should get over it, I should move on, but it's like, how can you? I mean, they lied about liberals, lied about Democrats, lied about Trump. It's kind of hard to just move on.
I know quite a few people my age who are in the Republican Party who they're thinking about leaving the Republican Party. They're thinking about leaving this Trumpism, this phenomenon.
I threw up the red flag, I threw up the white flag, I threw up whatever I could throw up as a warning that this was bad agricultural policy and it was going to hurt us for a long time.
I was reading the Bible and reading some scripture, and in the Bible, and some verses jumped out at me. And I had to repent for that. I said, God, I am sorry for voting for him.
What does Jesus say? Love God with everything you have and love your neighbor as yourself. Where is that love God, love neighbor, love self? That's the kingdom of God. And what we're living with right now is Christianity that is about empire, not kingdom of God.
This is not a political issue. This virus does not care. It doesn't care the color of your skin. It doesn't care about the God to whom you pray. It infects, it spreads like wildfire, and it can kill you. Game over.
So this was a pandemic film as well. And how much did that affect things for you?
Quite a bit. We started filming in January and February 2020, and we were trying to raise money at the same time. We really didn't have any. We just sort of, you make it and they will come attitude toward it. And we went to New Hampshire with Joe Walsh. He had just done Iowa, and probably 2 weeks after we came back from New Hampshire, we're getting ready to go out again, and everything locked down. And nobody knew anything then. There was no vaccine. It was the real lockdown, like, don't leave your house, order everything in. And that was really challenging. I'm an old school filmmaker, and I'm, part of what I like to do is to go into people's lives and really observe and then follow up on what I observe. And I couldn't realize I couldn't do that. So after a few weeks of just being paralyzed, we devised a production method, which I guess is kind of common now, where I was directing literally through Zoom. I mean, somebody would have a little iPhone or an iPad or a laptop. And because there was so little work, we were able to get 1-man or 2-man band production crews in all the local places very, very affordably. And we saved all the money we would have spent on travel and hotels and all that stuff by having me interview people long distance. And it worked great. I was afraid it would look like different. I was afraid that it wouldn't have the intimacy, and that really, really bothered me. But it actually does. I don't think you can really tell that most of the interviews I'm miles and miles away. Not all of them. We did do some of the local New York stuff ourselves. And there were a couple, but basically what we do is we'd ask people, how comfortable are you with having a camera crew? Would you be comfortable having them shoot you on your front porch? Would you be comfortable having them shoot you in your house? And everyone had a different answer. And so we respected all of them, and nobody got COVID and it went really, really well and saved us, hundreds of thousands of dollars, which we never would have raised. So in a way, it made the film possible.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, yeah, I'm glad that worked out for you in that regard.
Absolutely.
So some of the people that you profiled. So you mentioned Joe Walsh, the former Republican congressman / radio host. Tell us about some of the other people that you.
Yes, Joe. I never thought I would say this, but I'm very good friends with Joe now, and he and his wife are wonderful, wonderful people. And it just reminded me of how I grew up, which is that when I was growing up, no one vilified Republicans. My mother used to have fights with the doctor neighbor up the street when she came over for cocktails, but they weren't insulting fights. They were actually fights over policy, and then everyone hugged each other and kissed each other and went home. And that has changed so much. And so anyway, Joe is a great guy, and it just shows you that. And one of the things I wanted to do with this film is to show Trumpers as human, because they're not all evil people. I don't know about, Proud Boys or those guys, but the ordinary Trump voter in 2016 was an ordinary person who was not, knee deep in policy, or not paying attention, or just seeing what they wanted to see and hearing what they wanted to hear. One of those people was Batya Goldberg. She was, at the time of Trump's election, she was 17, but she was already a huge rising star in the sort of the Charlie Kirk kind of Republican turning point kind of young Republican set. And she was Republican all the way. She started the Brooklyn Young Republicans Club. She ran a bunch of campaigns as like a 15, 16, 17-year-old, a bunch of actual, real big campaigns in New York. And she was just looked at as a rising star because she was so smart and so clear and so articulate. And she was all for Trump. In fact, she was so for Trump, she went to a bunch of rallies, stood in line for hours, and she went to the inauguration. She was working on a campaign of a guy who was running for mayor of New York, and he got tickets to really good seats to the inauguration and to the best inaugural ball. There's a photo of her there with Kellyanne Conway, and she said it was the best time of her life. She felt so important and wonderful, and she remembers seeing the people in the crowd who were saying, not my president. And she said, I really thought they were just mentally unstable. I didn't know what they were talking about. But ultimately, she said, they saw what I couldn't see then. So she came all the way around. And the reason she came around was Charlottesville. That was her reason, because she's Jewish from a family with a lot of Holocaust deaths in the background. And her parents were refuseniks from Russia. They were Jewish refugees who'd come over in the 80s, or just before the wall fell. And she was born here. They weren't going to have kids in Russia. That's how badly they felt the authoritarian the communist culture was. They didn't want to raise a child in that culture. So they got here, they both became citizens, and then they raised her. And they had been telling her their whole lives. They didn't try to interfere with any of her beliefs, or, her father was pretty right wing. Her mother was, I would say she was independent, but maybe very human rights leaning. But her mother didn't try to interfere with her very far right kind of belief system. And she just told her everything that had happened to them and what signs to look out for when you're looking out for fascism. And when Putin, when Trump agreed with Putin in Helsinki in 2018, she was stunned. So it was between that, the Charlottesville thing, and Putin that she realized this guy is really bad for the country. And she didn't want to tell anyone for the longest time. And in fact, there's a nice tie-in because it was actually her seeing Joe Walsh come out and lose his TV show and lose his radio show and, be pilloried, but he still had the bravery and went on to speak out against Trump. And she said, if he can do it, I can do it because I don't have as much to lose. But she did lose a lot, actually. But she is a brilliant young woman, and her first election that she voted in was 2020, and she voted for Joe Biden. She's in college in Israel, but she's a really wonderful, brave, strong, and very smart woman. And as she says in the documentary, once you start seeing the holes in Trump's myth, you can't unsee them anymore. And then you see more and you see more. And that's what happened to her. When we first formulated what we wanted to do with the film, the producer, Mary Craven, and I, we decided to set up some ideals of people we wanted. And one of the things we wanted was a farmer, a Midwestern farmer who changed their mind. And in the beginning, it sounded impossible, but we found Chris Gibbs, who was a salt of the earth Ohio farmer, very successful farm. It's quite large at the moment, but he started with nothing. And he is in his 60s, and he was a Reagan Republican all the way. He was very diplomacy, open up the world, human rights, all the things Republicans once said they were. And he actually was the head of his local Central Committee. And what happened to him was he was excited when Trump got elected. He didn't really want to vote for him at first, but then he did some things early on that got him really excited. And he thought, hey, we're going to shake this up. This is going to be really interesting. This guy might not be bad at all. And then he saw what Trump was doing to trade. And the trade, the tariffs, and all the messing around he did by picking fights with our trading partners. It's not spoken about that much, but it really destroyed the agricultural markets and the business. And a lot of farmers went bankrupt. Suicides among farmers were huge because you can't really hang on that long as a farmer if you have all these bad seasons. And when you can't sell your stuff, that's bad. So he got very angry about that. And he felt that the subsidies that Trump admin was giving to farmers, kind of to make up for it, it was like hush money to him. So he became very outspoken, and he was disavowed by the Ohio Republicans, which he'd been a part of for like 30 years. And that was it for him. He decided to speak up. And he's just a wonderful, incredibly intelligent, articulate, salt of the earth guy who knows how to speak in metaphors and in stories. And he was a real find. And he's just a lovely, lovely man. He came to a couple of our festivals in LA with us. And he was like a celebrity to all the people in the audience because he's very tall and very distinctive looking. And let's see, after Chris, there was David. David Weissman. After Chris, there was David Weissman, who you might know from Twitter if you're on Twitter. David was not only pro-Trump, he was a Trump troll. I mean, he was a real behind-the-scenes, organized, harass people troll. Nasty as all get out. And he was a veteran, and he believed 1,000% that Democrats were evil and that Barack Obama was evil and Hillary smelled like sulfur and, all the lies, he believed them. And he harassed people, especially celebrities, who were anti-Trump. And the goal was to harass them till they block you. And then that's sort of like a
bad
head over your mantle, Mm-hmm. And so he did that until he went after Sarah Silverman, the comedian and actress. And she was nice to him. She didn't say anything bad back. She didn't block him. She just very cordially explained the facts of what she was saying and asked him if he was more interested in being right or the truth. And that really got him because he thought he was seeing the truth. So he asked more questions, and then people in her follower brigade started to contact him and give him things to read. And especially one woman, Sarah O'Connell, who is a person he never, ever would have been friends with before this. But they really created almost a 2-year friendship, long distance, obviously during lockdown. And also she lives in England now, but she started to send him multi-sources and very well sourced, not liberal source, but deep facts, primary sources, statistics that would basically prove Trump was lying. And to his credit, he read. And the more he saw, the worse it got for him. And the more he felt he'd been lied to. And he may have been targeted because he was a member of the military. We don't know that. But that was sort of where his political views formed, which is scary. But he came all the way around until, he's so strongly anti-Trump now, and he's like a super Democrat, which is really interesting. I don't think Botcha really became a Democrat. Chris Gibbs did actually become a Democrat. I think probably in 2021, I think he became a Democrat, sometime in there. And then we also have 3 evangelicals, which I'm sure you could identify with. And they talk about how basically they were told who to vote for from the pulpit. Even if they weren't told directly, there was no mistaking what their pastors were telling them. And one of them was at Liberty University, and he said, there was no question. He was afraid not to vote for Trump because he was afraid he'd be ostracized.
So what is Liberty University for those who don't know what that is?
Liberty University is one of the biggest Christian evangelical universities in the United States, very much like Bob Jones or some of the other ones that you might have heard of. It was founded by Jerry Falwell Sr., who in the 80s was the founder of the Moral Majority. And he passed it on basically to his son, who was not a minister and is not a minister, but he started running it. And his son really upped the ante. He raised so much money for it. And it became like a country club practically. And a lot of evangelicals go there. I don't know what kind of an education you get there. I really don't know. But one of our evangelical people that we talked to was a young man named Nathan Munson. And 2016 was his first election that he voted in because he was just turned 18. And he told us that the university was pretty much pushing them in the direction of voting for Trump.
Reality for a lot of people who are raised in these fundamentalist religions, that the leaders may not explicitly tell you who to vote for, but they tell you which party is evil and which party serves Satan. And so that's, it's a pretty clear instruction as to who you should be supporting. It's
very clean. Our other couple that we had, they ended up after they were directly told by their pastor to vote for Trump. And, for reasons of abortion and they said Hillary Clinton was going to try to destroy the church the minute she got in, which is insane because she's actually quite a religious person. And it scared them, and the husband really felt bad after he voted for Trump, and he didn't know why. He just felt a gut feeling. He was a new Christian only 4 years had he been, saved, and he just felt bad about it. And someone at his work challenged him about that, and because he was a guy who talked a lot about Christianity, how it changed his life, and that sort of woke him up, snapped him out of it. And then he did his own research with the Bible, with scripture, and he basically, what he dug up was that Trump is everything that Christ was not. He's the opposite. And they ended up leaving their church after 2020 because their preacher from the pulpit was preaching about the stolen election. And they knew it was a lie, and they just walked. They said, we're sorry, we can't stay. And they're still evangelical, but they couldn't stay in that particular parish anymore.
Yeah. Well, and what about some of there was, I guess, so those are the three then that you profiled?
Yeah, Nathan and Ron and Cindy Hawthorne were their names, the couple.
Yeah. Well,
they came to one of our film festivals too, which was great. Ocean City, Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess for a lot of pretty much everybody that you talk about in the film, that it was a gradual process. It was something that didn't happen overnight, and I'm sure was frustrating to people that they knew who disagreed with them, but they didn't give up on them, basically.
No, and I think again, there was no one reason. Everyone had something affect them personally that woke them up. And I don't know, your situation with getting out of Mormonism, but I know that in cults that usually there's that moment where somehow your cognitive dissonance sort of snaps. And what happens there is either you let in new information or you shut down even more. And these people let in new information, and that's the key to change. And literally to living an honest life, in my opinion. To be able to change when faced with new information that proves your old information was wrong. Yeah,
well, and that definitely was the case for me with leaving fundamentalist Mormonism. I mean, I had gone to church services every day of my life, basically, or every Sunday, sorry, every Sunday of my life. And I was 27, and I had just recently moved to a new place with one of my brothers. And the first Sunday that we were there, we got up in time to leave. And I said to him, I don't really like going to it. Do you? I don't want to go. And he said, neither do I. And so we stopped going, but basically once that whole sort of, the habit broke for us, we then our parents started asking us, well, you still believe in it, right? You still believe in it. And it occurred to me finally, I've never actually looked at the evidence of whether these beliefs are true. I had been told from my childhood that they were true, and I never had assumed otherwise. And I kind of had a similar thing with my exit from right-wing media and politics, that I had, because again, I had brought up and I had developed a career in that world, and basically I had started writing a book to sort of try to get, so after I left Mormonism, I became non-religious, and I spent a number of years trying to get Republican and right-wing activists to become more tolerant of non-Christians and non-religious people. And in the course of writing a book that was kind of urging that, I realized, what, this could be the best written prose ever, and it wouldn't matter, because they think that what they're doing is serving God. And I can't argue someone out of that.
I think most of them think it, really believe it, but I do think a lot of them use that excuse. And usually they're the ones they're in Congress and, religion is a good tool for them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, use it as an excuse of what? To themselves or to the public? Well,
as an excuse to lie, really, an excuse to be a hypocrite and lie publicly, despite what you're really doing privately, because you tell yourself you're lying for the greater good and you're lying for the glory of God. And, I don't read anything in the New Testament anyway that condones that. But I read it several times. I mean, I was raised Catholic and Episcopalian, and also I was raised, my mother was agnostic, but she wanted me to understand world religions. So she used to take me when I was really small. I mean, like we're talking like 6, 7, 8 to, she took me to a number of synagogues. She took me to Greek Orthodox Church. She took me to a Buddhist retreat. I mean, she wanted me to see, and she used to say, and she was way ahead of her time. She was also raised Episcopalian. And my grandmother, her mother, was sort of my mentor in that religion. And I actually did return to it for a long time. But she used to say that every religion has some piece of the truth. But the minute somebody tells you they have the only truth, run. She used to say that all the time. And that's sort of what I live by now, because what religion you are is an accident of how you're born. So, is most of the world that is Islamic not Christian? Are they all wrong? Just because of how they were born, where they were born, to whom they were born. I mean, it's when you take it apart, you realize that, religious doctrine is a choice. And it's often used to control people, not to bring them closer to God.
Yeah, well, now, I guess since the film came out, have you been contacted by people that wanted to share their own experience with you, or experience with people that they knew who had a
Yes,
similar journey?
I've had a lot of people talk about people they knew. I've had a lot of people show the film to people they knew, and I haven't gotten any good anecdotes about changes. I got a recent anecdote about somebody who had convinced their sister, but and felt just so grateful that she was out of the cult, but felt like she was still sort of fudging whether Trump was great or not, and that he was really excited that she saw this, because she pushed her even more further that way. Because we vetted this a million ways to Sunday. I come from old school. I come from an era where when you did a nonfiction program for, say, NBC, you had to have 3 references proving any claim you made. And that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, you don't have to have anything. So that was really important to me, and my colleagues, Mary Carey Craven and Marilis Ernst, who was our co-producer and editor. I mean, getting the stuff right and making sure the sources were right and correct was really important.
Yeah, well, you don't want to be wrong in a movie talking about disinformation.
Oh, you don't. There's a lot of really interesting things that have happened, as we submitted to film festivals and got comments back from some of them, or got nothing back from some of them. It was interesting. It was really interesting. But we have won awards in 20 festivals, including a lot of best documentary, some best directing, best storytelling, best editing. So, we're very proud of what we did, and the fact that we did it on a shoestring under all sorts of bizarre circumstances, and that all the people who are in it are so proud they were in it. Nobody had second thoughts. There were people that we were looking, like I had a dream of a Hispanic family living on the Texas border who'd been there for a long time. This is like very specific, but who voted for Trump and then realized that Trump was coming for their land to build the wall. And that happened to a lot of people. And we did reach out to some of them who were, who in the worst way had discovered what Trump was really about. But they were in the middle of lawsuits because, eminent domain, they offer you pennies on the dollar and you have to go back and fight to get what your land is really worth, or to fight them doing it all together. And so nobody wanted to be speaking during their lawsuit, which makes sense. And then there was a few other groups that I was hoping to get an African-American man who was conservative, because there's a lot of that. Not too much, thank God, but there's a very sort of staunch anti-LGBTQ male thing in the African American community, and that sometimes causes people to vote for people like Trump. And also, Trump appealed to men who felt like they were men, real men, which is insane because, after 5 times dodging the draft, and, a guy who puts on makeup every day and doesn't comb over and fake spray tan and, is just incredibly vain, is really, and, has never, the only sport he does is golf, and he doesn't even walk. That's the only exercise you get golfing is walking on the course, and he drives. So, the fact that he was put up to be this great macho guy, but, he has the rhetoric down. And so I wanted a guy from that community who had changed his mind. And we looked and looked, and we didn't get anyone who wanted to talk, which again, a lot of times people would talk to us and then change their mind. They're happy to talk on the phone, but when you really think about sitting in front of a camera that everyone's going to see. And that was it. It was that peer pressure. And it was that peer pressure that I was trying to reach through, to break with this documentary, because so many people are in communities that all believe the same thing, especially evangelicals. They're in sort of semi-isolated groups, and they don't know anyone who didn't vote for Trump. That's just how it is. You don't go to a barbecue and talk about anything but how great Trump is and how awful the Democrats are. And so my theory was there were people out there who were probably very good people who were going to bed with a knot in their stomach a lot, but they didn't feel they had any permission to talk about it. And I wanted people to see that other people had done it and done well, and how they did it. Because you're right, it was a very gradual process for everybody. Nobody had like that overnight boom. They had instigating moments that pushed them all the way, but there was always a long, long period before that.
So just to go back to something you were saying earlier there, that because of geography and because of political sorting, urban liberal and rural conservative, a lot of people, they really never come into contact with somebody who disagrees with them politically, unless they might happen to be related to them. But especially where you live in New York, your average, true believing Trump voter, it's almost like just a fictional character you see on your TV.
Actually,
it's not real.
You got to realize Staten Island is incredibly right wing. It's where a lot of working class. My husband grew up in Brooklyn, and a very working class family. His father was an iron worker, and his brother was an iron worker, and his grandfather was a mounted cop, and the people they hung with were cops and firemen and iron workers, and worked in for the city, and they're very conservative, and they were Democrats for a long time, and then they started to change probably around the Bush era, when Democrats started to be portrayed as traitors because they were against the Iraq War, or they were for the Iraq War, but then they discovered bad stuff about it. And so we are actually, the thing about New York is it is a melting pot. It runs on immigrants. So it's very diverse, the city. I'm out here in Rockland County, New York, which is about 40 minutes north, 30 minutes north driving. You can't take a subway here. It's more of a small town, and it's heavily red. I would say it's probably not so heavy, but it's like 55, 45, you know what I mean? It's like, I was always surprised. I didn't learn that until after Trump, really. I didn't learn how, but I go on some of these hiking trails, and some people I've known and been friendly with and just adored for years suddenly started saying things that I knew weren't true. And I was really shocked. So that's not necessarily true. And it's not, nor is it in Massachusetts, where I was born, and we have a cottage on the beach there.
Yeah, well, I guess nonetheless, though, for your average Manhattanite, left-wing Manhattanite, for a lot don't them who have only, lived there, or Brooklyn, or something like that.
Sure,
they don't see it's, like it's hard for them to fathom why someone could support Trump or support Republicans and not just be, just this flagrant racist or something like that. It's not real.
And that's why I wanted to also show these people as human. We're just all flawed human beings trying to do our best. And sometimes our best is influenced by things it shouldn't be influenced by.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that, in some cases there might be, people who work in some industry or live in some area that it actually might in fact be better for them to do it personally. But, and yet for I think a lot of analysis that you see in progressive or left of center media sometimes, that there's this idea that, well, this idea of what's the matter with Kansas, that people can't possibly have a reason for backing right-wing ideas. And of course, and the reality is, I mean, it is true that of these, politicians and whatnot, they actually are making anti-populist sentiment. But if you're not, in policies, but if you're not conversant in this stuff,
sure.
But how are you going to know what their policies are?
Exactly. And
I
think that's, people are subjected to biased information and they have no idea it's biased. And I would say that on the left as well, but primarily on the right, because they have Fox News and they have the crazy right-wing media, which is getting, I think, crazier all the time, just saying ridiculous, outlandish, not true falsehoods. And I think because the liberal media is not really liberal, it's corporate. The corporate media, which is all the mainstream media, the networks, the cable channels, anything that's not independent media, like you were talking about earlier, they have the mandate of being both sidesers, so everything that somebody says, they could say that the earth is flat and that is given an equal weight to the earth is round. Well, let's have a discussion about it. Let's hear from you. And then, what gets ratings is people fighting about it. So they want to get the most far out there earth is flatter and the most far out there earth is rounder and put them together in a ring and let them go at it. And that has really changed the dialogue in America.
It has. And it's such a betrayal of true journalism as well, because I mean, the reality is that, you are supposed to be helping people build on their stack of knowledge, not continually making them start over. And like, even if you believe in this marketplace of ideas, quote unquote, I mean, the reality is, like, when you go to a supermarket, you're not seeing the supermarket say, hey, we're going to sell you beef that is uninspected, and we're going to offer you beef that is inspected, and you can choose which one you want. Do you want the uninspected beef because you know what, it's going to be half the cost,
right?
But you might get really sick from it. But hey, you know what, it might be half the cost. And the reality is, some people would buy that. They would buy that beef,
of course.
Because it's cheaper, and for whatever, and it's the same thing with information, that as an information purveyor, a journalist, or whether you're a social media company, you have an obligation to have quality control in your marketplace.
Yes. And I think America, our First Amendment is one of the envies of the world, but at the same time, it has been weaponized against us. And a country like Germany has a hate speech out exception. And we were kind of going in that direction. And there was a lot of controversy about it because there's a lot of people who are just religious purists about the First Amendment. But the truth is, hate speech is not, especially if it's really inciting people to view another group in a negative way. And again, that was something I didn't want to do in this documentary. I did not want to paint Republicans as bad people, because they're not. They're not. I mean, there's bad Democrats and there's bad Republicans, but overall, I still believe that people are genuinely try to be good. And I think we have to believe that what we do is good. And that's part of where we start making excuses. And, well, I just said that because God would want me to. We want to feel that everything we do is good. And that's a natural human thing. And that's why it's hard for others to change our minds, because I think we have this like a switch that just wants to be right and it's very difficult to admit you're wrong. And it's very difficult to realize that you were really wrong, and how wrong you were actually hurt other people. And it takes a lot of courage to come out and say that and to change or to learn. And that's why I really believe the people in our film are so brave.
Yeah. Well, now it's also, the radicalization. I mean, because it's a little bit tricky, because on the one hand, these people with these extreme far right fundamentalist beliefs, they've always been there in the Republican Party. They've always had power. I mean, Jerry Falwell, as a person you mentioned, but Trump brought them to the forefront, and ended up really empowering a lot of extremist people like Kanye West, like that Nick Fuentes guy. But the reality is, though, that because the Republican Party has gotten more extreme, Democrats have had to adjust how they campaign as well. And I think that, well, I'm curious what you think about, what Joe Biden has been doing in the past two to 3 years since he came in.
Well, Joe Biden was always a centrist Dem. He was always extremely human rights motivated, but he was also a centrist. And he was the glad-handing guy who would work across the aisle and get compromises done in all the time he's been there. And I think, he is now further left than he was, because he realizes that their base is becoming further left. But what is further left, really? I mean, is it we want to be communists? I haven't heard a lot of that from really anybody except the super fringe. People who are, anti-war all the time, build flowers instead of bombs or whatever. That's not the majority, I don't think, of the Democratic Party. Certainly not the Democrats that I know and have grown up with. And I've lived in very democratic places like LA. I mean, that really, Hollywood, LA was, I would say that was much more like your example of people who never saw a Trump supporter. If you're in that entertainment industry, it's really, really hard to see one. I mean, even if you've got like a studio head who does vote Republican quietly, you're not going to hear it. So, but you do, there are a lot of people who do that, by the way. There's a lot of people who are very anti-tax, anti-regulation in the businesses, and they will quietly vote Republican now and then, or maybe more than now and then, but you won't be hearing that publicly. And so you don't think anyone believes it. So that is, that's part of it. But Joe Biden, I think he's done a good job. And I think it's been amazing what he's been able to accomplish with all the boundaries that he's been given, with Kristen Sinema and Manchin in Congress and not being able to get a majority. And now she's become an independent today, and she said, don't worry, my beliefs and my actions will not change. And I said, it's like, that's what I'm worried about. But,
well, I guess I'm thinking about like his idea of talking about the ultra MAGA Republican, and he's trying to, Biden has been putting a strong emphasis to try to say that these are different than your conventional previous Republicans.
Well, they are.
Yeah, and I think that was effective.
I think it's effective too, and I think I don't think he said it. I mean, it's been misquoted, but I don't think I thought he made it clear he's not talking about all Republicans. He made it very clear. And Joe Biden is a guy who I like that he's he's so much older now and he's lost so much in his life, because I feel like now he can actually, he's not as concerned with being loved by everybody, and he's more concerned with doing right. And I believe that he wants the best for this country. He doesn't want us to be communist. He doesn't want us to be socialist. He wants a little more fairness, which is really, you know, speaking of people who haven't met other people, I've talked to a lot of Republicans and read a lot of Republicans who clearly have never met a Democrat or have never really had a conversation with one, because they wouldn't say the outlandish things they say, you know, like drag shows are grooming. Well, drag has a wonderful history going back to the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. That's where it started. I mean, it wasn't drag like we see drag now, but men dressing as women and going on stage and really dressing as women is an old tradition of the theater and a beloved tradition. And you can look at like Milton Berle, you know, not a communist. Milton Berle. Who are some of the other people who,
well, actually, Rudy Giuliani has done drag.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think Milo Yiannopoulos did drag, but drag is just, you know, first of all, some people who do drag aren't gay. Some people, most people aren't trans who do drag. And I have my house in Cape Cod is in a very, very LGBTQ area. I mean, one of the top areas in the country. And I've grown up going there every year. And I saw drag show. I saw, you know, I guess I grew up believing this was all normal because it is. And that's why it's really astonishing to see it being so rapidly weaponized against people I care about, a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I think it's a way to kind of smuggle back those issues that the far right lost on. So, like, you know, they never got over same-sex marriage, and and which is interesting because like the right-wing elites never got over it, but their voters actually did. So, like, when you poll,
isn't it up to like 75% or 71% or something?
In the country itself, like 70s, yeah, but like even a majority of Republican voters, support same-sex marriage now, and but it's something that, you know, and this really does illustrate the dichotomy that I think a lot of people who are you know, left of center don't quite get, is that the Republican voter, the Republican electorate, is very different from the reactionary faction that controls the Republican Party. A lot of people don't get that.
Yeah, no, and that, again, that was another thing I wanted to point out in our documentary. Republicans, like Democrats, are ordinary people. Some of them are jerks and some of them aren't. Some of the Democrats are jerks and some aren't. Some Democrats have like insane ideas. You know, I always say like the Green New Deal, which I believe in so much in terms of theory, but there really was no Green New Deal. It was basically a wish list. I mean, it wasn't policy, it was a wish list. And even that, you know, has been weaponized, but also by our side too, because super left people will scream that, you know, it has to be, you have to enact it tomorrow. And I think one thing that's true about the left, and having been an activist a lot of my life and having always been liberal, more moderate liberal, like in the last 20 years. But I think when you're young, I think a lot of Republicans now were young Democrats at one point. You have a lot of utopian, idealistic ideals, and you don't understand why things can't change instantly, which is why you get a lot of really young idealists who become cynical. But part of it is just growing up, really. You can stay on the left, but you don't expect it to happen tomorrow. You don't expect us all to be equal and and fixed tomorrow. There's some things that really should be fixed tomorrow. I think racial inequality is up there. I think prejudice against LGBTQ people. I think anti-Semitism. Come on, why we're bringing that back? Really?
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing I think that's important for Americans to understand is that, like, our political spectrum is distorted. It's shifted further to the right.
Yes.
Than
yes, and
other
people don't believe that
in the world are. And like in other countries, the conservatives, they support socialized medicine.
Oh yeah.
In other countries, they support much higher minimum wages than we do. They support union negotiating with
longer
all
vacations.
large companies, and
Yeah.
and in France they're pushing for a 4-day work week. The conservatives are.
Yeah.
And so, like, and that's something that for, I think, a lot of people, there's a tradition within conservatism as a philosophy that has gotten lost in the United States, which is that conservatism is actually moderation. Like, if you are a moderate, that's what a conservative is.
Right.
And that what we call conservatism in the United States is really this, bizarre, fundamentalist derived reactionary system that is either religiously fundamentalist or market-based fundamentalism. If you don't let the rich people do whatever they want, then it's communism.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's really scary. In fact, something that Chris Gibbs said to me, which he's changed his position on. Chris Gibbs, when we were interviewing him, he was staunchly Republican. He had no plans to ever become a Democrat. He felt like Trump was the outlier. And as he was basically, punished and disappeared by his party just for disagreeing with them, he began to look deeper. But he said to me, he said, Democrats hate anyone who has more than them. It's like, no, it's different wanting people to be on even a slightly more level playing field than to want everybody to be the same. And, my stepdaughter, when she was in college and Occupy Wall Street was going on, which turns out to have been kind of an op, but she said, she came home and she said, is it true that Democrats want everyone to make the same salary? I said, what? She says, well, my friends at school were telling me that Democrats and liberals, they want everybody to only make the exact same amount. And I don't know if that's true of the very, very, very far extreme left, but no, I think your mainstream Democrat, which I sort of am at this point, is pro-capitalism, but we want guardrails. I'm very pro-capitalism, and I want it to be very strictly regulated, because greed is a human emotion. I mean, greed is part of who we are as people. And
you can't have a free market without the government protecting it to exist.
Well, that libertarians will tell you that's not true.
Yeah, well, they'll be wrong.
Hey, I read a great book which you would really enjoy. It's called A Libertarian Walks Into a Bear. And it's a story of this utopian libertarian community in New Hampshire, and how it devolves into insanity, which is, it's a great, but it's very entertaining, and but also tragic in some ways, because being extremely, like, totally anti-government is not really possible in the world we live in now. It's too many people.
Yeah. Well, this has been a good conversation, and I appreciate you being here. Before we wrap up, though, I did want to talk about 2024. I mean, so Donald Trump, of course, has already announced that he's running for president. Do you think he's going to be able to get out of the primary, or have Republicans, kind of realize that this guy isn't really going to do anything for them?
I don't know. I mean, it might be a little different now past the midterms, because everything he wanted to happen in the midterms did not happen. And I don't know, but he may be indicted soon. Who knows? But at the same time, apparently in America, you can be a felon and indicted and in jail and still run for president, which seems like a kind of a big loophole. But
well, you can be dead and still win as your candidate.
That's right. You can.
Several people have pulled it off.
That seems like a loophole that should be looked at. But I think that they will defer to him, even if they have second thoughts about it. I know a lot of donors have gone over to DeSantis, and actually Pence has a bunch of donors too. But you know, he has a huge war chest. He has money coming in from everywhere, bad places, and I think that they're going to run him because they're so afraid of his base. And if he was able to get, one thing about Trump is he was able to get a lot of people who were conservative-ish and some liberal-ish people to vote for him who hadn't voted before and never thought about voting before. He got people excited. He got, I think, a lot of really apathetic people excited. He was different. You know, he had a great shtick, but
there was something new.
Sorry?
Something new.
Something new, exactly. And in our film, we have a little parable that Chris Gibbs, the farmer, tells, a folksy parable about how Trump is like, it's like you have termites in your house and you try to get rid of them, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. And then some guy comes around and says, I have everything, new chemicals, great stuff, best ever. What have you got to lose? Try it. And a lot of people said, yeah, what have we got to lose? You know, let's try it. We're disillusioned with everything. And they realized that his solution to getting rid of the termites was just blowing up your house. No termites, they're all dead, and so is your house. But that's a great parable. And I think that the something new and we're going to do things differently, and I'm the only one, rhetoric does work on some people. I mean, those of us who've studied fascism, right, we understand that rhetoric is not new. It's playbook fascism from Hitler, Mussolini, Orban, all those guys. But a lot of people don't know that. Americans are notoriously history illiterate, and especially our own history. And I think that will continue on. I really feel like they think they're trapped by him. And a lot of people don't want him, and he's a pain in the ass. And I think by this time, people have realized that he will turn on you in a heartbeat, no matter how close you are to him. If you cross him in any way, like just even a critical statement or a disagreement, you're out. You're going to be destroyed. And that's also a lesson of fascism, which I wish people would learn. I don't understand why they don't see it. You're not safe at all. Nobody's safe with fascism except the fascist, and ultimately not him. But he will turn on close people. Fascists turn on their inner circles all the time. You look at Stalin. There's all these photos where like one person after another has been, you know, old-fashioned Photoshop basically has been cut out of the photo till it's just him. Because he's gotten rid of all the other people. And what did they do? I don't know. You know, none of them tried to take over, but whatever they did, they fell out of favor with him. They did something he didn't like, and boom, they're gone. And that, and they were really gone, like dead gone. I don't understand why the Republicans aren't seeing this. They don't want to see it. I think but history has repeated itself so many times with this whole scenario. Read Timothy Snyder. I don't know if you read him at all. He's laid it all out in a million ways, in a million different languages. But I think he will win the primary if there's a primary. I think he will. But it will divide the party even more. So I think the party is going to be wrestling with this, the Republican Party, for the next 2 years.
Okay. All right. Well, appreciate your thoughts there. So just to, before we go, put up on the screen. So we've been speaking with Melissa Peltier. She is the writer and director of The Game Is Up. It's a documentary about disillusioned Trump voters, and you can get her on Twitter as well. She's on there, Melissa J. Peltier. That's Peltier for those listening. And appreciate you being here today, Melissa.
Thank you.
Oh, and I should add also, where can people watch the film if they want to?
Well, we're on Amazon in beautiful 4K video with no ads. And I think the rental is $3.99 or $4.99. I don't know which it is right now. Amazon has an algorithm that nobody understands. But
can they watch it anywhere else?
Yes, you can watch it free with commercials, though, at Tubi. A lot of people have Tubi, and it's a great service. And then also you can watch it at YouTube at IndieRights.com. Indie Rights is our distributor. And they have a YouTube channel, and all the movies there are free, but there are ads.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I encourage people to check it out. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks. Great conversation.
All right. Well, that is our program for today. Appreciate everybody for joining this show and listening or watching. And another program we're going to be releasing soon as well. And hope you can join us for that. So, but before we go, I did want to remind everybody that A Theory of Change is part of the Flux Media Network. So you go to flux.community for more articles about politics, media, religion, and technology, and how they all interrelate with each other and all the larger trends in these topics. And then if you want to go to the archives of this show, just go to theoryofchange.show, and that will take you right to the episode archives. And you can get transcripts at video and audio of all the episodes. But the full transcripts are available only to the subscribers of our Patreon. So you can support us, and we definitely appreciate that. We need your help to keep doing this. The address for that is patreon.com/discoverflux. So thank you for watching and listening today, and I hope to catch you on the next episode. My name is Matthew Sheffield, and appreciate you being here.